Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, everybody. We have made it to 41 episodes of the USMB Lead Pods. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Matt Ersman, and grateful to have you with us today. So today we're diving into another really important topic. A few weeks ago, we talked about security in churches, specifically about kids, how to protect kids from dangerous situations. Today we're kind of diving a step deeper and continuing the conversation about security in churches. My guest today is Greg Snider. Greg spent about 30 years in law enforcement. He was also in the military, and now he actually does a lot of training with churches, kind of training church leaders how to handle various aspects of church security. And it's just one of those things you don't want to think about. We all think that our church is going to be immune to some kind of disaster or tragedy, but it's way better to be prepared than to find yourself in a situation that you weren't ready for, obviously. So I think Greg has a lot of practical steps that are good for all of us to think about, including, when we hear security, I think a lot of us jump to horrible things like shootings or some kind of violence. But, church security also has to do with things like, what if there's a tornado, or what if someone has a heart attack, and who calls 911, and what do you do when they get there? Just those kind of nuts and bolts things that we all need to be ready for as church leaders. So Greg has lots of the great things that I think we all need to be thinking about, and I think you're really going to enjoy Greg. He's a great guy. So we'll take a quick break and then get right to our church security episode with Greg Snider.
Superintendents and principals are finding that trauma-responsive education is a major deficit and need right now in American schools. Tabor's graduates of the Masters of Education in Neuroscience and Trauma degree will be able to respond to this need and serve all students who face difficult life challenges. Learn more at tabor.edu/online.
All right, my friends, we've got a really important topic today that I'm glad that we are taking some time to talk about, and we're joined by a real expert in the field. I've gotten to know this guy a little bit over the past few days. I'm excited to introduce you to Greg Snider. Greg has been in law enforcement for over 30 years. He's an ordained minister. He was in the military for several years, and now he spends a lot of time helping churches deal with security and how to tackle that. So, Greg, really appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
I forgot to mention you are in Morganton, North Carolina. So grateful to have you. Grateful to have you with us today. So Greg, you and I chatted yesterday a little bit, and I think when it comes to security, especially church security, it's one of those things, I think everyone would say, oh, that's important. That's a good thing to think about. But at the same time, I think a lot of people also think, whenever we see the horrible tragedies in the news of some kind of shooting or something, we feel horrible about those things. But we also, whether we would say it out loud or not, a lot of us think something along the lines of, oh, that's horrible, but that would never happen in my church. Or, that's way over there. My community's different. I'm sure you've heard that in your experience, right? Is that a common thing that you hear from people?
That is a common thing. And usually what happens is people start, they don't usually outreach for guidance until something happens, and then it's too late.
Yeah.
There's a saying that, I think Sun Tzu said it, that when the drums of war sound, it's too late to sharpen the sword. And usually when people reach out for guidance on church security, something has already happened and they were not prepared, and they see that they weren't prepared. And then they start trying to fix it after the fact. So yeah, you're correct, sir.
Okay. So with the training that you do for churches, can you walk us through it? Tell me what kind of training you offer? What does that kind of thing actually look like?
Okay. So when people think of church security, really the only thing that jumps out in their mind is the worst of the worst of the worst. So they're thinking, in their mind, somebody's going to come in and shoot the place up. How to defeat that? Well, that's not all. That's just a small part of church security or a safety plan. It's much more broader than that. You've got to protect the congregation from everything, and the pastoral staff. So not only just from, people coming in trying to act violence against your congregation, but people that want to break into your facility at night, people that may want to vandalize, or people that want to show up and protest during a church event, all the way to who do you have that takes up money for the church on the offering, and are they safe and secure, or are they put in a position where they may fall under temptation? So church safety and security goes far, far, far beyond somebody coming in and trying to do a violent act against the church members.
Yeah. And I know one thing that, again, we talked yesterday briefly is that it's hard because every church is so different. We're all different sizes. We're in different communities. We have different personalities on staff. So I know that there's probably some like hard and fast rules that work for every church, but it's also, you kind of have to know what's helpful, what's practical, realistic for your own community, right? That's part of this too.
That is. So obviously where the church is located, those are going to come with its own unique set of things to be concerned about. Like in the Midwest, you're going to have tornadoes, so you'll have to worry about that. That's part of church security. You're inside a church with windows that have stained glass, so nobody can pay attention to what's happening outside. Do you have people that's monitoring the weather to make sure it's safe for everybody to still be sitting in there during church and the roof not get torn off? So each individual place, or you may be out somewhere out on the West Coast where you have all the fires. So each geographical location of the church is going to be different. And also the people in those areas are going to be different. So, the problem that when we're talking about geographical areas, well, it's a small town, nothing ever is going to happen here. And that's not true. So if we're going to bring up geographical areas, we need to also talk about even small towns have mass issues that take place in church settings. And I've got one that I would love to talk about, because I'm sure the church of a really small church never envisioned something catastrophic would happen, but it did.
Yeah. Well, why don't you fill us in? What's the story that you're talking about?
Okay. So, a small town church in Sutherland Spring, Texas. It's First Baptist Church. Small township. There's like 400 people in the township. Nothing ever happens in a small, sleepy town. Well, that's not the case, because on November the 5th, 2017, this person named Patrick Kelly came into the church and killed 26 people of the 50 that were in the congregation.
Wow. And
he wounded 22 more. So almost the entire body of the church suffered a violent incident that occurred against them that day. And it's a small town of 400. So, your big mega churches, they have things that happen there all the time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it is that when the enemy comes to visit, they know that there's so many people there, they can reach a whole lot more people of the Christian faith by showing up to protest at a mega church than they could show up at a protest at a small church. But the small churches are not exempt from having things take place either. So whether it's a big church or a small church, use your imagination, because that's what the enemy can bring against you this upcoming Sunday or any day of the week.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that perspective too, because I think, we hear, the tragic school shootings, we hear a lot about that. And there are kind of increasingly more church violence things that have happened in the past few years. So I think we often forget that there is a spiritual element to this, right? Like you mentioned, like Satan does not want us to have successful church services. So that is clearly a reason. Why else have you think there's been kind of an uptick in church violence?
When you look at the human element, you've got to stop and figure. Let's take, say, domestic violence or child custody as an issue. These are your church people that come to church. A predator or a person that wishes to do harm for a church member knows that they're going to be at church at a specific time during the week. So they know they're going to be there. So that's a guaranteed target. I know they'll be at church Sunday at 11 o'clock. That's where I'm going to go. And I'm either going to get my kid back, or that's where I'm going to go and meet my ex-wife. And we're going to have we're going to make this whatever take place. But the uptick, I'm going to be completely honest with you. And we have to bring COVID into this too. COVID, the enemy brings COVID against us, and we have so much division now that what happens is we can't even come together in person anymore. We're having to do over internet. And why? Because we don't want to get sick, and we want to make a safe place for our congregation to be able to worship. So if we all gather in a church building of 100 or 200 anymore, you can't do that. Well, all that does is it just tries to drive us away from the Holy Spirit. It tries to remove us from it, tries to separate us. So the enemy comes, and the enemy will come and vandalize the church building. The enemy comes and he'll break in and steal all your electronics or your sound equipment and try to stop the services from happening. And that's the biggest thing that takes place is property crime. So you show up for Sunday, there's no praise and worship today. Why? Because somebody broke in Saturday night. The enemy is just trying to keep us from gathering, and trying to keep us from worshiping, and trying to keep us from praising the Lord.
I think, unfortunately, you're right. And I'm just so glad that you've given so much of your life really to help with this super important issue. So we might come back to some of the bigger picture stuff, but I know that today you've kind of prepped 6 steps or 6 questions that really every church should think about things they should maybe put into practice. So let's just kind of kick things off by going through your 6 things you prepared for us. So yeah, start us off. I think the first one is about a safety plan, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, prior to doing anything, prior to sitting down and coming up with some kind of an idea or a safety plan that you want to enact, it's going to be really critical and important for you to reach out, the church itself, to reach out to your insurance provider and to your district moderator that you belong to. And the reason being is understand all churches are responsible and liable for their own properties and their activities that take place on their property. But as a matter of protocol, they should consult their liability insurance provider as well as the district moderator for any guidance and direction and any kind of policies that may be already in place or procedures to follow, plans that can be enacted, or any guidelines. And the reason being is because when you enact a church safety plan, the church is taking on some liabilities of that.
Okay.
So speaking of a church safety plan, there should be some things that need to be part of that. So obviously the overall congregational safety is the critical thing here, because if it's not a safe environment, people are not going to come to church and worship.
Right.
But how do you make a safe environment? So you have to look at the entire property and every aspect of the property, and not just say a violent event that takes place, but cars being broken into while you're in church. Well, I'm not going to go back to church because my car keeps being broken into.
Yeah.
So, you have to look at it from that. So you have to have congregational safety, which includes your medical emergencies, as well as any kind of physical security of your congregation. So a safety plan should outline services that the church has organized and the safety aspects in regards to the congregation. And those are going to be from like heart attacks, diabetic incidents, or an armed beam intruder that comes in response to that. So your safety plan needs to cover all of that stuff, medical or any kind of a violent attack that may take place. And part of your congregation is your pastoral team. So you can't overlook that. So pastoral protection is very important, because you have to understand that the pastoral staff of the churches, they're the faces that represent the church.
Yeah.
So they're easy targets for outside entities as well as their families. So if you target the pastor or the family of the pastor, that makes a huge impact on the church and the day in and day out kingdom building that should be taking place. But you've attacked the head of the church or the leader of the church.
Yeah.
So the protection of the pastor also covers the residency he stays at. Make sure it's safe for the pastor to be there. Most churches provide a house for the pastor to live in. So your safety plan should cover that as well.
And one thing I know that you've got in your notes here I'm looking at is just even just practical things like, okay, if there is an emergency, who calls 911? Like, because if everyone's dialing at the same time, that could cause problems. And when the cops get there, who do they talk to?
So you're exactly right. So let's say you have 100 people in church on Sunday, and any event takes place. Let's just take the violence out, and let's just say somebody has a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
So 99 people are on their cell phones and they're calling 911 because they want to try to get help there. But if you have a safety plan in place and you have people that are designated to do that for the church, on behalf of the church, then you have 3 or 4 people that make the phone call and not 99. Because what happens is you have 2 dispatchers sitting in a room and they get 99 911 calls that come in, and it overloads the system, and it's going to prolong any kind of proper care that's going to be coming. I mean, because they have to sort through all these phone calls. So It just inundates the system and it shuts everything down. So having a plan in place would have people in place ready to make a phone call if one was needed to be made versus the whole congregation.
Yep. Yeah. I can see how that'd be super important. Another thing you mentioned just a few minutes ago was the whole idea of like custody issues and child security. And again, that's just increasingly, unfortunately, a more and more prevalent issue. So do you have how do you start with that whole thing?
That's huge. But here's the thing. If it's not safe for mom and dad to be in the sanctuary and their child to be in children's service somewhere else in the building away from them, then they're not going to come. Mm-hmm. So churches need to have some kind of a secure sign in and sign out system. I've seen everything from tags. You have 2 tags. The kid has one, and the parent that signs the kid in has the other. I've seen invisible ink. If you don't have a specific number on your hand on the invisible ink, you don't get your kid back, and the kid has to have the same number. Mm. So if you don't have a secure way to sign in and sign out the children, then anybody could show up and pick up the child. So go back to what I said. If I am a dad and I know that my child is going to be at church at 11 o'clock on Sunday. I know my ex-wife that I'm estranged from is going to be in the congregation. I'll show up and go get my kid. I don't have custody.
Mm-hmm.
But if the church has a sign-in, sign-out system and nobody has access to these children, they can worship and they can be fed the Holy Spirit and receive a lesson and a message safely. Somebody shows up. If the church has prior knowledge that there's child custody issue, that person doesn't get the child. And now we can start the intervention, and we may have to make a call for the local authorities to come and intervene. But the child is safe.
Yeah, that's really important. So again, I guess so in my day-to-day job, I work in communication, like church communication. So that's a huge element of this too, right? Is if you have a safety plan, how do you make sure that everybody knows what to do, right? So do you have any tips on that? Like, do you just print a bunch of copies of something, or do you
No.
Yeah, tell me about how do you actually tell people about this?
Okay, so there's things that you would want to share with the congregations and things that you would not. So if you have a safety team in place, the safety team is going to be your door greeters, your ushers, your outside parking lot patrol people. There's going to be your guys that are inside that will take care of any kind of disturbance. So you want to try to do all of this to create a safe environment. So when the people are sitting in the congregation, they're not distracted. Mm-hmm. So you have all this information supplied to your safety team. The only thing that I would share with the congregation would be to say, hey, if something happens, we have a safety team in place. They're the ones that will call 911. They're the ones that will handle this. They're the ones that will take care of all this for you. So you will still be able to worship and still be able to serve the Lord. So that may include you having walkie-talkies for your safety team. But if you have walkie-talkies, they can't be loud, so you have to run like an earbud. Mm-hmm. So if the person watching the camera says, hey, there's somebody out in the parking lot messing around, and they say it over the walkie, it's over an earbud and not broadcast out, because the enemy, you know what the enemy's going to do? Take that and make everybody look at the person with the walkie-talkie to hear what's going on, and they're not listening to the pastor.
Yep, that's right.
So everything has to be behind the scenes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You have to practice. You have to make it perfect. You have to get everything in order and in line. So when people show up to do their worship on Sunday, it's as safe as possible. It's with the least distractions as possible, and they get to have that time, the intimate time with the Lord in the church. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I can just the more we're talking, I can just tell how important that safety team is. So I think the second step you have for us here is just to kind of take a look at what your current policies are. Can you tell us what's kind of your second step you recommend for people?
First, you look at what you have in place. It may need to be updated. It may need, needs a phone tree added to it or whatever. But whatever your safety plan is in place, it needs to have everything spelled out, because the church is liable again for any plan that it comes up with. So if it falls short and people, we don't want to bring any kind of liability against the church, because that's a negative image. And, well, I'm not going to go to this church over here because they let this happen or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you got to have, you got to keep your plan up to date. But part of your safety plan is like, who your money handling. You got to have policies for that. You got to have evacuation plans. Mm-hmm. Now, your evacuation plans that are in your policy or in your safety plan are going to be different. So you would have like a fire evacuation. It's going to look a whole lot more different than an active shooter type evacuation, mm-hmm. and probably different than a weather related evacuation. So, hey, there's a tornado coming. We need to go and take shelter. Whereas a fire, we need to go out and stand in the ball field. Well, you don't want to stand in the ball field, but if that's the only evacuation plan you have, you're going to come up short.
Right.
So have something for each contingency. And part of your safety plan is your current fire inspection. Mm-hmm. So your fire marshal can come out and really show you some key elements of safety concerns that may be on your property to make it where it's more safe for your people to come.
Okay, next up, I think you have some tips about a medical team. Tell me about that and how churches might be able to get started with a medical team.
Hey, you know what? That's easy. It really is. So let me tell you how easy it is that you can have all kinds of medical people in your congregation. Do an outreach for first responders, do an outreach for firemen, do an outreach for nurses and doctors, anyone in the medical field, and hey, look, why don't you come to see what we have on Sunday? Come and, worship with us. And you start bringing people in. You specifically go out and recruit them. Mm-hmm. Hey, where are you going to church? Why don't you come and visit with us? And if you can recruit people into your medical team, guess what? They're home people. Now they're part of your home team. And so utilize them for their profession, because it's free. It didn't cost you anything. And that's the same with your security side of it too. Do you have a law enforcement outreach? So specifically, what are you looking for? If you need plumbers because you got a huge church and a bunch of bathrooms, then go out and do a plumber outreach, So in other words, just go get people and bring them to the house of God, But, law enforcement outreach. Hey, fellas, where y'all going to church? Why don't you come and check ours out? That's a free security team right there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. So let's say for either the medical or the security team, let's say there is some sort of incident. Let's say someone, has a heart attack or there's some kind of issue. What I guess what the next part of the safety plan is obviously what happens next, right? So how does the, random congregation member, or how does the staff member get in touch with the medical team? How have you seen that work well?
Okay, so usually what takes place is, a lot of the churches have their sound system in the back, so it's not visible, because that's a distraction. So that's where your camera guy is, and everything else is at the back of the church. So that's where you would place someone to start monitoring this. So you would have someone that sits back there. They have a walkie-talkie. They're able to talk to everybody. And I would also have a walkie-talkie up at the for the pastor. Now, it doesn't need to be on, but he can have a walkie-talkie up there too, because you don't know what may happen. So your safety team that sees something can get on the walkie and start calling, hey, look, we need a medical team over here on the left-hand side, 3 pews down or whatever. They can come over, and the medical team have walkie-talkies. They come over and they take care of whatever's going on. If you can remove the person from the sanctuary, by all means do so. The reason being is it's going to be a distraction. It will distract from everybody. The person needs to receive care, and the church members that are in there need to receive the message. So if you have a team in place, they will be able to take care of the needs of that church member that's having a medical event, and the church still be able to keep on feeding the people that are sitting in the pews.
And I know some churches have some kind of like texting line or probably some kind of app or some kind of technology where they can do this in real time. Have you seen any of those tools work, or is a walkie-talkie really, you just need something that works quickly, right? Is that what you think works best?
It is, and here's why. So when I'm preaching and I'm I'm sitting up there and I'm looking out at everybody, if I see their heads down and I see an electronic device in their hands, man, that just tears me up, because I think I'm failing. Mm-hmm. So, so you've got congregation members sitting in there, you've got safety team guys holding their phone in their hand. They have no clue what's going on. So they just think that they're just zoning out and they're playing a game or something on their phone or whatever. So it's going to be a distraction for the church members. Texting also would rely on, you would have to have cell service. Not all churches are going to have cell service.
Okay.
And so, and if you have if you're being nice and you have your phone on silent, so it don't create a disturbance during the church service, you're not going to know that somebody just sent you a text that said, hey, we need you in the front lobby, or we need you at the back of the church, or whatever. So walkie-talkies, that's instantaneous. The only thing is they're not always secure. So if you buy the ones at Walmart and other people have the ones from Walmart, they may be able to dial up your channel and interfere too, but that's usually not common, but it could happen.
Yep.
So you wouldn't want to say anything over the radio that you wouldn't want repeated somewhere else. So by somebody's name or call somebody's name out or something like that.
Gotcha.
But walkie-talkies by far are the best and the fastest in communication.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see how for a medical team, I think that's somewhat self-explanatory. You've got a team ready. You've got a plan for something happens. They know who to contact and how. That makes sense to me. Let's talk about the security part of it for a minute. So, because to me, the medical sounds it's not necessarily passive, but it's a little bit more straightforward. With security, what have you seen? Like, do you need to have active security officers walking around all the time? Are they in the parking lot? Kind of practically speaking, what does a good security team look like?
Ultimately, it depends on how many people that you have that are wanting to volunteer for this. But it doesn't go just with that. You need to vet every resource that a church uses. So if you have a youth pastor, you've got to vet that youth pastor before you turn kids loose in their presence. Sure. Same with a security team member, or same with a medical team member. So once you've vetted this person and they're good to go and they're able to do this. So the way it happens is your security team needs to be, if you can, the more you have, the more places you can put them. But I'm going to tell you, 70% of all the violent events that take place in churches start in the parking lot.
Okay.
So if you had safety team members in the parking lot, or even one just standing on top of the hill watching the parking lot, they would be able to summons help, or they would be able to summons more safety team members, or be able to call and get the local law enforcement entities coming that way. So 70% of your violent acts start in the parking lot, and then they work their way inside the building. So if you don't have somebody out there doing a perimeter for you, then it's already inside the building before you know it.
Yep.
And that's where the numbers will start stacking up. First Baptist in Texas will tell you that.
Yep.
So, so your safety team, if you have the staffing, you have different layers of perimeter. You have an outside perimeter. You have them at the door. You have the door greeters. They're just as nice as can be, but they should be trained and ready to do whatever they need to do to stop someone from coming in and enacting violence on the church members. So the safety team is going to be multifaceted. It's going to be multi-layered, depending on what you have for personnel and their certifications and what kind of training they've had.
I love what you said about, being intentional about outreach to nurses or police officers or whoever to kind of get them involved in your church. I'm just curious, again, just practically speaking, you were a police officer for many years. I'm sure you know a lot of police officers. Would they appreciate the idea of, hey, come to our church because we need some help? Obviously, we care about them. We're going to be friendly, but I also could see some people would be hesitant to be like, hey, come here so we can get some free help. How can you actually pull that off?
Well, ultimately, you want them to come there for free help, but you're not going to go up to them and shake their hand and say, I see you're a cop. Come to our church. We need help. No,
of course. Right.
No. So, here's the thing. I was a chaplain for the tactical team. Of course, I was on the tactical team forever. And I was a personal chaplain for a lot of the members of the department because they didn't have a home church. And police officers are unique entities. They really are. And in our profession, it's called sheepdog. So a lot of times the sheep don't understand the sheepdog, and the sheepdog doesn't get along with the sheep well because that's your accountability partner. So having said that, churches that reach out to law enforcement or whatever it is, the medical entities, the nurses, your firefighters, or whatever, when you reach out to them, you're inviting them in as a friendly thing. Hey, come and see what we have. Yeah. Even come on duty. We've had fire trucks show up at our church, and all the firemen come in. We've had police officers show up, park their car, and come in and sit. And they use earbuds on their radio, and if they have to leave, they leave. But the congregation loves to see these people here. Now they're just visiting. We would love to see them there as members.
Yep.
So when you do an outreach, they probably have families and they probably have kids. So if you say, hey, come see what we got Sunday, bring your kids. It's a safe place. Come and hang out. Your kids, we have this, our youth pastor. They're going to have a blast. It's a great time. It's safe at our church. Come and visit. Police officers know how unsafe this world is.
Right.
So they're going to be skeptical about the safety of the place. And if you can get them to be a member, they're going to take ownership of it. And they're going to make sure and ensure that it's a safe place, not only for them and their family, but for you and your family to go and worship God.
One thing I just thought about, another issue I've heard some churches talk about is just the idea of whether you should have uniformed or like ununiformed kind of street clothes officers. Can you talk about that a little bit? What do you recommend?
Okay. Obviously, if you have police officers, and some churches actually, and even in my area, they pay for officers to come. They pay an off-duty salary, and they come and they stand out in the parking lot and they walk through the church and things like that. I think that's great, and it's nice to see your local authorities at your churches. They're not being fed. Now, understand that they're there doing a job. So they're not being fed the Spirit. So you've got them there. You've invited them to come, and you're paying them off-duty pay to be out to do security for you. That's okay, and that's great. Now, they're in uniform. Now, they can also take care of any summonsing more help. They can get fire out there. They can do all that with their radio. They can take care of all that for you. But with your security staff, if you have in-house security staff, you're not going to want your police officer that's off duty on Sunday show up in uniform. So he's going to be in plain clothes. But let's say you don't have law enforcement at all. You have volunteers from inside the congregation. Where it becomes muddy, when law enforcement shows up, they have no clue who your safety security team is.
Right.
So some churches have like a sash that they put across that says safety team or security or anything that makes them stand out to where they'll be visible when law enforcement responds.
Yep.
That would be the go-to person. So if I showed up at your church and I answered a call of the service there, I'm going to look for somebody that stands out that I need to talk to this person.
Yep.
So it clarifies it. Furthermore, let's say you have people inside your congregation that are part of your security team, and they're armed because they're licensed concealed carry holders. Well, when the officer gets there, all he's going to see is somebody in your church with a gun, and people have been shot or whatever, and some violent act has happened. If they're not readily identifiable, you can see where there could be some miscommunication.
Right.
So I'm not saying that they need to be in a uniform. I would say that a mixture of some wearing polo shirts that maybe say security, or some with the sash across them that say security. But I don't think you should have 100% of your staff readily identifiable. And here's why. Some churches have had intruders that came in and sat in the congregation. They stood out. They acted very furtive, and then they enacted their plan. So churches that have security staff members that are not readily identifiable, I have seen churches do this where they would send a guy up to sit right beside him. That's your best church buddy at all. He'll be praising with you, and he's going to praise the Lord, and everything. You'll never know he's part of the security staff. But he's sitting right beside the suspicious person. Now, what better feel would you have there? Hey, we got one of our own guys sitting right beside him. So if he does something, we'll take care of it. But we're not stereotyping either. So, I mean, somebody may be just having a bad day. I was in a church one day, sitting up front. The children's service is happening. We hadn't taken up collection yet. A guy comes in the church, boots the inner doors open, and stomps all the way down to the altar, kneels down, and he's having a bad day. Of course, I'm taking care of this. I'm already in position to be able to take care of him if he tries to hurt anybody or whatever. He kneels down. He says a prayer, says, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do," which is a red flag for me because he's not going to do anything inside this church. And so I get up and stand with him, and I escort him right on out the door. And he leaves. He wasn't there for church. He came to do whatever he was going to do, but he left. We didn't deny him a chance to worship. He came in, created disturbance and everything else. But so you need to have people that are in uniform or readily identifiable and people that are not.
Yep. I like that. That's really smart to have both. I like that a lot. So you just mentioned something that's probably a touchy subject for some churches, the whole concealed weapon permit idea. Again, the policy might vary church to church, but can you just touch more on that a little bit more, what you recommend and how to handle that?
Absolutely. So this is critical. So what churches need to understand, let's say I know that in my congregation, 10 people are concealed carry holders. So as a pastor of the church, I say, okay, you guys carry guns. You always got your gun with you and everything else. Well, we'll just let you take care of anything that comes through the door. Once you do that and you acknowledge that, the church assumes all liability that's associated with that because they now become agents of the church. Yeah. So if you're relying on concealed carry holders to be your church security, you need to make sure that their certifications are up to speed and they know what they're doing, and maybe even reach out and get some training for them. Because again, the church is liable for everything that takes place on the church ground. And if this guy pulls his weapon out and he couldn't shoot the side of the barn and he shoots somebody inadvertently, there's a problem. It is a touchy subject. So before people get all up in arms over that, let me just say, I bet the First Baptist Church in Texas would have liked to have had a concealed carry holder inside the congregation when 26 got killed that day. Yep. Let's think about that for just a second. It is a touchy subject, but if the church acknowledges that Billy Bob has a gun in his pocket, he'll take care of anything that comes in, then the church just assumed all liability. So again, go back to your liability insurance company and your district and come up with a plan. You really need to have a safety plan that outlines things like this.
Yeah, that's crucial, especially when you carry liability. You got to make sure you have answers to all the questions that'll come up if something like that happens. So super important. Okay, one of the last things I know we need to talk about is you've mentioned a couple of times already that it's really helpful just to get in touch with your local law enforcement. Can you talk more about what does it look like and what all do we need to let them know? What all should they let us know about? Just talk about what that partnership could look like.
Absolutely. And that's one way to start your recruitment process too, by the way.
Yeah, there you go.
So most agencies have a crime prevention unit. So during the week, the church is usually not with church members Monday through Saturday, usually during the day, business hours, but the administration's there. So invite the crime prevention guy to come out, be it a city or a county or whoever it is that represents you, and let them walk through and do a physical security checklist. And let them walk through with you and let them talk to you about crime prevention tactics like CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So when your police officer comes out and he's doing a crime prevention walkthrough, he can tell you if your bushes are too high and it's blocking windows. Mm-hmm. Well, why is that important? Well, if the bushes are too high, I can hide behind the bushes. If the bushes are too high, I can bust a window out, gain entry to the church, and go steal everything. Nobody, a passerby, could see the bushes are too high. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So he can also, your crime prevention guy can tell you, well, this is a slip, trip, or fall hazard right here. Well, let's take a bad guy out of the situation. I don't want to see somebody get hurt and trip, So if your guy comes out and he says, hey, look, this crime prevention, your step right here is cracked or broken. If somebody falls, they could get hurt. Mm-hmm. So it goes more beyond just a violent act. There's a whole lot more to it than that. But your crime prevention guy can come out and recommend, hey, look, you might want to put some cameras up, or you may want an alarm system. But one thing I will caution you, if you put an alarm system in, and I really strongly recommend every church have an alarm system, part of your safety plan is who has the code and who would disarm it. Because we've answered so many false alarm calls because people had keys to the church, but they didn't have the alarm code, or they forgot the alarm code, and it ties up resources. Mm-hmm. Some agencies are charging for false alarm calls. Yep. Now, that's not cool to charge a church $50 for a false alarm call, but it's still occupying resources. Yep. 2 or 3 officers is going to have to come around and walk around your facility to make sure it's okay when someone didn't have an alarm code. So alarms are really important, but they can also be a headache and a nightmare too, especially for your callback people that, oh man, Billy Bob's up there and he didn't type in the code. I'll take care of it. Uh-huh. So you don't want the cry wolf syndrome to happen. You want when the alarm goes off and is activated, law enforcement shows up as if this is the real thing. Mm-hmm. Not as if we've been here 50 times already this month. So crime prevention will help you with that. Yep. Where you should put lights up, or your light's broken, or whatever you need to do around your facility to make it a whole lot more safe.
You just mentioned like bushes and things like that. What other kind of practical things can we be on the lookout for? Again, I know yesterday we briefly mentioned that like your doors should probably have a window on them so people can, if they walk by, they can see if something fishy is going on or not, or, locked doors, or what other kind of just really practical things can we talk about?
Sure, absolutely. So talking about doors. So whenever you have an activity going on in the church, it's really strongly recommended that this is a bad choice of words, but it's the best way I can explain it to you. Lock the church down and have one way in, one way out. Mm-hmm. And that's got somebody standing there monitoring it. So you would have one door coming in the sanctuary, or if you have a mega church, you would have a whole bank of doors on one wall that are accessible to come and go. But the rest of the facility is locked down. And the reason being is you don't want somebody sneaking in and doing something inside the church. And you certainly don't want somebody sneaking in while the people are counting the offering and somewhere by themselves deep in the church, and which has happened. There was a man and woman that were counting the offering up. Someone came into the church. They were down in the basement of the church. They were severely assaulted. And they had no idea until many hours later that anything took place because they were out of sight, out of mind. Nobody could hear them. The money was gone, but no life is ever worth even $1 or $10,000. No life is worth any money.
That's right.
So we got to keep that in consideration there. So, but with doors, so under a safe sanctuaries type format, office doors need to have a glass window in it. Not to where people could hear, but where people could see. Because, anybody could be used against your pastoral staff. Yeah. So if somebody comes in and requests to speak to the pastor, they go in and shut the door, and they can always come back out and make all kinds of allegations. Well, the pastor's done. Mm-hmm. Really, it's really it's a defamation of character deal. But if word gets out that the pastor is supposedly making advances toward whoever, that'll destroy the congregation and the church and its faith and all this with this person.
Yep.
So you put windows in to detract away from the temptation of any of that, of any wrongdoing or alleged wrongdoing. So you have the doors that are locked and secured during any events. You have glass windows in offices so people can see in, and it takes away from any kind of allegations that don't need to be made.
Yeah, good. That's so important, especially now lately with just as these allegations have gone kind of rampant. We need to protect ourselves and protect our community for sure.
Absolutely.
So one thing you said a couple of times I want to make sure we hit before we begin to wrap up here is that a lot of times, let's say we have a really faithful volunteer who's on one of these teams or really any of our teams. If we're not careful, they might serve so much that they don't actually get to be part of the service, right? Like if you've got your security guy in the parking lot every week, we can't forget to also take care of their souls, right? I know that's something that you care a lot about. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Everywhere I've gone to teach about church security, I ask them, hey, this is great. You've got a huge team here. You've got many members. And they're out here engaged on an assignment throughout the entire time the church is in there worshiping. When do they get fed? Mm-hmm. Now, it's also the same as your pastor. Who's feeding your pastor? Is anybody trying to feed the pastor? The pastor, he or she, is busy all the time feeding everybody else, and somebody should be feeding them. So that's the same with your safety team. If you got, like you said, you got to go out in the parking lot every Sunday, or even if you got a greeter at the door, or in between the doors, or you got people, if they're on a post, they are concentrating on this job because there's lives at stake here. They're not listening to the pastor. They can't. Right. They have to pay attention to their post. So you need to make sure that they get fed somehow. Maybe they have a Wednesday night church service, or you get with them before church and you feed your safety team members the message. But they're so critical that they get fed as well. Otherwise, it becomes just a job. And now you've got a guy that's standing out in the parking lot, rain, sleet, snow. It doesn't matter, but he ain't hearing the word of God. We're not being good stewards, are we? Yep, so if you have a safety team, you have to also take them in consideration and make sure that they get fed the message.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you included that because that is very crucial. All right, Greg, man, our time has gone really fast. I can't believe it's already been about 40 minutes.
Man, it's quick.
It was quick. Well, so Greg, I know like the security stuff is just so important. And again, I think a lot of churches have, a little bit of a plan probably, but maybe not as much as they should have. And you're right that people need to feel safe when they come to church, and it's our responsibility to make sure, obviously accidents might happen or horrible things may happen, but we've got to do our best to be prepared. So, like you mentioned, the devil would love nothing more than to destroy a healthy church and distract them from hearing from the word of God. So important. Thank you for the work that you've done. Anything that we didn't cover today you want to make sure we hit before we wrap up today?
No, just safeguard your people. Safeguard your people as best as possible. Know that the enemy is not going to appreciate what you're doing and try to come against you. And the job of the enemy is to kill, steal, and destroy. Yep. So if we're set up for that and we're prepared for that, then we're still able to worship our Lord, and we're still able to praise him and have a great Sunday meeting or a Wednesday meeting or whenever you're coming together. And that's what it's all about.
Yep. Well said. Okay, my last question for you: if people have other questions, or if they would like to dive a little bit deeper, do you have any other resources, or do you have any other books or videos, or what would you recommend if people want to take kind of a next step?
I would recommend Google searching church security companies and then vet those companies before you bring them out. And I'm not trying to throw a plug in, but there is a national company that goes around, and it's one that I teach through, and it's Strategos International, and they're out of Missouri. If you look at any kind of a church security training, you don't need to send all your safety team members. Look at it as a train-to-trainer type format. You send a couple of people, they go and learn everything and bring it back and teach the rest of your safety team and your pastoral staff. Whatever you come up with, include your pastoral staff, your deacons, or all your leadership people in this, and send them to this school, or send a few to this school or to a school anywhere to learn church security. If you're large enough, bring the church security class to you. You host it and bring the smaller churches in and let them learn as well. But please go get training somewhere.
Greg, well, you are so helpful. Our time went really fast today. I feel like we covered a lot of ground. I know we could have covered a lot more, but That was just very insightful for me personally, and I'm sure everybody listening too. So thank you for all the work that you're doing and for sharing with us today. It's been awesome getting to know you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for doing this because this is very important.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate your time, my friend.
Yes, sir.
On December 1st, USMB will launch our annual Giving Tuesday campaign to celebrate and encourage giving. Over the past 6 years, we've raised over $176,000 for Kingdom Ministries. This year, with your help, we hope to add to that amount. All donations on Giving Tuesday will help resource USMB church planters and provide lead initiatives for MB pastors and churches. Please consider supporting USMB on Giving Tuesday by visiting usmb.org and follow the link to donate online. You can also watch your inbox and follow USMB on social media for more information. Thanks for your continued generosity on this year's Giving Tuesday.
Well, Greg Snider, you're a good man. Thank you for sharing with us today. Lots of practical things that we can all be thinking about. So our thanks to Greg. You know, I'm still not really used to when someone calls me sir that much. I'm not quite used to that, but Greg, very nice guy. Lots of good things to think about. And thank you to you today, wherever you are. Always grateful that you choose to tune in. So thank you for spending some time with us. I encourage you to gather whatever your security team currently looks like. Think about what you need to do for your security plan. Put those things into action, because I think it's just wise for all of us in leadership to have a good plan. So hope this has been helpful, and I hope to see you again next time when we have another conversation for church leaders right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.